We're talking to Alan Kinder. Welcome, Alan. How are you?
I'm doing fine.
So first of all, tell folks who you are, where you're from, and then we'll talk about your D-Day experiences.
Well, I'm originally from the mountains near Seattle, Washington, near Mount Rainier. I took ceramic engineering in college because my dad had started a laborer in a sewer pipe plant in the old days, and I just naturally fell into that field. It was a small field. I got married in 50, moved to California, several years there, and in 1957 I came to Milledgeville, Georgia, which was quite an experience. It was like going to another country, and we learned to love it, and we settled here and moved back in and out of the state for a while, and here I am. I was with Oconee Clay in Milledgeville. Later I was with Chattahoochee Brick in Atlanta. And my wife, Pat, we came together here to, as a couple, to Smoky. She passed away 3 years later, and I just stayed. So here I am.
So you graduated from high school in 1942 out of Seattle.
Yeah.
And when were you drafted?
Actually, I went to college at 17. When I hit my 18th birthday, I was given a 6 months extension until I finished that year. So I graduated at a little over 18, and I was drafted finally then at 18 and a half.
And that was around the end of 1943?
Yes.
Tell us about how you got to Normandy.
Well, obviously by boat.
Yes.
Well, it was interesting. About 2 months, I was in a specialized outfit. We located enemy guns by a very prehistoric method. Now they use drones, but we didn't have drones in those days or radar. So somebody invented this, developed a system. We had microphones in the ground, and we located guns by listening to them and locating them. I joined after basic. I joined a field artillery observation battalion in Fort Lewis, Washington. Fortunately, one of the first breaks I got in my life, I was a few miles from home, and it was very nice.
So you ended up going to Normandy, but you weren't in the June 6th invasion.
No, we were in Fort Lewis, Washington on D-Day. We left the next day for Europe. Yeah, thank heaven it was Europe, not the Pacific. But it took us a month to get out of America to England. We spent another month in England, so we landed on Utah Beach
in August.
About 2.5 months after.
Right.
The battle, we could still hear guns in the background. We knew there was fighting going on. We landed on the 17th, and on the 20th, the Battle of Falais Gap occurred about 30 miles away, where the British and the Americans finally captured tens of thousands of Germans, and the war, that part of the war, kind of calmed down. So by the time we landed, the beach itself was peaceful and quiet. So when we go over to Normandy, I'll be seeing the beach for the first time.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
So you ended up serving there until the end of the war?
Oh, yeah. We landed and went across the beach, I guess. I don't remember. It was dark in the middle of the night. We ended up in a field the next day or so, spent a couple of days getting organized. And by this time, that battle I mentioned had occurred, and all of a sudden, the Third Army just started swooshing across France. So we just followed, not a picnic, because we saw a lot of things we hadn't seen as kids. But we saw a little bit of the war, but we had an easy trip for the next month. So it was almost 3 months after D-Day that we really saw action.
Yeah, and so I think we talked about this just in a limited way, that my father was in the invasion of southern France.
Yeah,
that happened in late August through the middle of September.
Yeah, we landed on August 17th. 2 days before, on August 15th, your dad came in from the south.
Yes.
And until I talked to you, I didn't even know there was an invasion from the south.
I was the same way. I mean, even though my dad had talked about it for many years, and I guess intuitively I knew the timing, but I always thought it was around the same time.
Yeah.
But it really was several months later, and I think it speaks to how much longer it took for everything to get done than what happens now.
Well, it makes me feel a little guilty in a way going over to the invasion. I could honestly and legally go to the Bulge. I don't want to go there, but I could, because I didn't really take a part in the invasion itself, because you went wherever they told you to go.
That's right.
And but it's such a coincidence, the timing. When I heard you were going to be going over to the invasion celebration, I remember thinking I would meet you at Normandy, and I realized that didn't make sense at all to you.
No, and we won't be going to Normandy. I would love to see Normandy, but for this trip, we won't be doing that. You were 18 and a half, 19 years old.
Yeah.
You'd never been really out of the small town that you lived in, or very much.
I'd been out of the state once.
Out of the state once. And so it had to have been, were you conquering heroes? Were people treating you that way?
You can't believe that day. I say we left Fort Lewis on the day after D-Day, and patriotism, of course, was absolutely rampant. It took us a week to get across the country on a troop train, and every place we stopped, people were yelling and congratulating us and so on. We hadn't done a thing yet, but we took all the free food and drinks and stuff that they offered us.
Now, how long were you in the military?
It was actually 2.5 total.
2.5 total.
In August of 43 and was discharged in December of 45.
So I love it that you gave me some of these documents that you had, and how you have your pay stub was for $300.
Yeah, I stored that up.
And that you were in for 2 years, 4 months, and 29 days. But this particular pay stub was $300.
Yeah, that was the final.
And you had travel pay, which I think is hysterical.
Yeah. Yeah, I used that. I caught an airplane flight from El Paso, Texas. I was at Beaumont Hospital in El Paso, and I had enough money with that $300 to fly home for my first
Airplane flight.
Yeah, I remember I had my last clean uniform on, my only clean uniform, and we approached Denver, Colorado in kind of bad weather, and the plane dropped, and we had just a plastic tray of food at the time on my lap. We went down, it went up, or the food went up and landed back on my uniform, so I got home with dirty clothes.
With no clean uniform. So what were you doing in the hospital?
That sounds dramatic, but I wasn't injured. But as we came home, at the end of the European War, we were 4 days we were on the boat, 4 days coming home. We were in the middle of the ocean when the Japanese War ended. They announced that everybody would be getting a 45-day
Leave.
furlough, and at the end of that, if you had 60 points, we would be discharged. And I had 59. The points had to do with your battles you were in, the time you were there, and so on. I had only 59, so I had to go back in for about an extra 2 months. And nobody wanted me because I was going to be out. So I went back to an infantry group in Fort Hood, Texas. They didn't want me, so I went to Beaumont Hospital. I ended up as a clerk typist. So it's very dramatic to say I was discharged in the hospital, but I didn't do much except type.
You were counting down the times.
Yeah.
So you're going to D-Day with your grandson. What are you hoping to see there? What are you looking forward to?
Memories, I think. As I say, I didn't literally see it, but since they told me almost a year ago that I would be going, I have had so many wonderful memories. And the fact I'm going with my grandson, I'm glad I have only one. I didn't have to choose, because they called one day and they said, would you like to go? And I said, yes. And the next question was, have you got somebody in your family to go with you? That was settled from that day. So he's been as excited as I am.
And so your birthday's January 26th.
Yeah, it'll be...
So you'll be 100 years old on January 26th.
Yeah, I'll have 8 months after, roughly 8 months after my trip to Normandy. I have 8 months to wait to 100, and then what the heck?
What the heck, right?
Yeah,
Is that your goal?
Yeah.
Okay, so my grandmother always wanted to live to be 100 because I hear you get a letter from the president if you live to be 100.
Yeah.
That's right.
I understand it, yeah.
That's right. You'll find out, won't you?
Yeah.
He's almost 100 too, so it's okay.
Yeah.
So what do you want to say to folk about, because you're being treated like you're this special person, which you are, Alan. I've met you before, but it was just a lot of regular guys, wasn't it?
Absolutely. That's why you hear people saying, well, we just did what we did, and that's all we could do. At 19, everybody ought to have basic training. Every man should, or every boy should, because you go in just completely innocent and stupid, and in 3 or 4 months, at least you feel a little more grown up. It wasn't all a bad experience at all. Just towards the end, the bulge was bad, but people keep saying thanks for your service, and I think actually I kind of enjoyed it looking back.
Well, you know, my father was in for about 6 years altogether, and part of that time was as a POW, but he used to always say they were the best years of his life, and for a long time I didn't understand what he meant by that. And then after 9/11, I started working with veterans groups a lot more. I'd always been respectful. I'd always thanked people for their service, but I actually got into the work of helping veterans. And I came to understand what he meant by that. Yeah, that it's because you have this camaraderie, you're depending upon each other, and even though it's terrible, you're in it together.
It was a different life, but I try to remember mostly the fun things. I got a list of about 12 fun things I'm keeping in my mind if we want to start talking about it overseas. I'll be meeting another 10 people with my group, and I won't meet them until we get to Paris. My grandson Justin and I will be going from Atlanta. We're traveling just the two of us, so we'll meet the rest of them in Paris. I'm really anxious to meet them because we have quarterly meetings at Smoky here. Right now, about 14 or 15 vets. Some come, some don't enjoy talking. Some you don't talk until I came out of the closet military-wise when Private Ryan came out, the movie. They'd always been so phony up to that point. John Wayne, who was a wonderful actor, but his movies, you knew he was an actor. Movie Private Ryan came out, and I didn't agree with all of it, but it was so realistic, and I hadn't even talked to my wife about the war. I never have, even after I started. But after that time, my grandson was growing older. He was in high school, college, I don't know, and started asking questions, so I wrote him by hand just a few pages. I don't know if he ever read it, but I enjoyed writing it. And once I wrote it, well, I haven't stopped talking since. Let's face it.
Alan Kinder, thank you for being with me today.